This podcast is brought to you by the School of Advanced Study, University of London. All of our podcasts are available from our website, www.sas.ac.uk.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to make a start talking about postgraduate and postdoctoral funding. Out of interest, how many of you are interested in doing MAs for school of study? Possibly PhDs afterwards? See how it goes? Yeah. When do you think about PhDs funding? Okay, so what I'm going to talk about will be some of the how I found funding to do my PhD here at the Institute of Historical Research. So I'll talk about some of the schemes, and I'll talk a little bit about postdoctoral funding. Because if you are interested in an academic career, it's worth thinking about what you might want to do afterwards. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about what you need to do on applications for funding. I was just telling Lisa, I've spent this afternoon before I came here. I'm also looking over someone's PhD proposal and tweaking it, ready for the ESRC scheme, which we use at my institution, University of Kent. My name is Kate Riley. I'm a lecturer in social history and social policy at the University of Kent. And as I suggested, I'm an alumni of the School of Advanced Study. So, my route to funding. I did my BA at Goldsmiths in what's now frighteningly the last century, and had like the old student loans, etc. I then did a self-funded MA, also at Goldsmiths, straight afterwards. This I kind of funded through a combination of a part-time job in a bookshop, which I recommend because you get a discount on books. It's always quite handy in the arts, humanities and social sciences. And then used a combination of an overdraft and a bank loan to pay for the fees for that. I don't recall why I didn't apply for funding at the time. I think I was a bit too preoccupied trying to finish an undergraduate degree. But when it came to my PhD, I had a Leave Hume Trust scholarship, which was a scholarship set up specifically for one of the research centres that was at the IHR at the time, the Centre for Contemporary British History, and it was to kind of help build up student numbers. And on top of the studentship, I also did part-time work. I worked part-time as an archivist for a day a week. I also did later on some part-time teaching, and I also did bits of admin as well, including a stint as the IHR receptionist, which was quite entertaining. You get to really meet everyone in your field with the reception desk. And then after my PhD, so about a year after I finished, I applied to was successful in the ESRC postdoctoral scheme. That doesn't exist in its current in that form anymore. I'll talk about that scheme briefly later on. But I also did some part-time lecturing work as well, and then joined Kent in 2007. I left my postdoc halfway through. So, kind of mixed experiences of funding postgraduate study through my own pocket or through the generosity of NatWest Bank in my case. Also having a studentship, having things on top that kind of help the CV, but also help your pocket as well, and then also finding work afterwards and having kind of funding at this stage. And in terms of writing funding applications, whether it's for, say, the AHRC to help pay for your MA, or whether it's for your PhD or a postdoc, a lot of the basics are the same, and I'll come to those kind of basics later on. So, the main funders of postgraduate studies are the research councils. So the ones that you will be most familiar with are the Arts and Humanities Research Council, or AHRC. You might also hear about the ESRC, which is the Economic and Social Research Council. My department at Kent are part of an ESRC doctoral training centre, so I'm a lot more familiar with the intricacies of their scheme. But much of what they do is very similar to what the AHRC do. So I can talk to you about the mechanics of an application, if there are some differences in how the schemes are managed in institutions. So The HRC have what's known as grant schemes. It's quite similar to, similar to the ESRC as the Doctoral Training Centre. In other words, the Research Council gives a number of studentships to institutions for them to allocate accordingly. And at SAS, you can have a AHRC block grant for history, MA and PhD, and in law for a PhD. So the academics at the IHR and the Institute of Advanced Legal Studies can tell you more about how those schemes operate. Those are where those grants lie. There are also institutional studentships as well. Now, SAS has 2 bursaries, and you should also check institutes' own offerings. For example, the IHR doesn't have a postgraduate scheme of its own that covers you, say, the whole 3 years of a PhD or that covers an MA, but they do have schemes that can cover, say, a 3rd year of a PhD. So if you were thinking about doing a history PhD part-time, you might want to consider applying for one of those schemes that kind of go to have the final full-time final year. There are lots of different schemes that will only have studentships based on your discipline, but also funds that might top up things like research grants, grants that are kind of going away to do research, etc., etc. Now, other schemes that you might hear of, and these are not based at SAS, there are things like the, as I mentioned, the ESRC Doctoral Training Centres. You might also come across what are known as CDA or CASE awards. CDA means Collaborative Doctoral Award. These are administered by the AHRC. And what they do, they're PhDs that you have a supervisor who's based in a university, but also one who's based in another organisation. The ones I'm most familiar with are history ones, where we have an academic supervisor and somebody based in a museum. So the IHR, for example, has had a number of collaborative doctoral awards with the British Post Office, British Postal Museum Archive. So you gain kind of skills beyond academia as part of your PhD. CASE is the same sort of thing for the ESRC. So it's when you have a partner, it's an academic partner organisation who also co-supervise your PhD. And also, in addition to writing a thesis, you'll also do something for the other organisation. The student I'm working with today is doing a CASE award with the ESRC, and that's very much, she's working, if she's successful, she'll be writing her PhD, but also the oral history interviews she does will go to the museum that she's interested in working with, so they can use it, incorporate it into their own kind of collections and exhibitions. You might also see studentships attached to people's research grants. So if someone's had a big research project, sometimes they will apply for funding to have studentships on themes that are connected to that research grant. So you're not doing their research for them, but you will be able to kind of benefit from the expertise of the person who's doing the research and other people attached to their research scheme. So they're things to kind of keep an eye out for. There are other sources of funding out there. I mean, I suggested there's the route of going to the bank. That's one option. There is also a scheme known as Professional and Career Development Loans. Now, these have been around in various forms for quite some time. They weren't around when I was doing my MA, so I have no experience in applying for them myself, although I do know people who use them to help pay for MAs, but also for PhDs as well. So you can have up to £10,000 for 2 years, and you repay it after you finish studying. So quite different to the standard bank loan, you repay it after your studies are over. So particularly well suited to an MA, or perhaps the beginning of a PhD. They're one option. So they're administered overseen by the government, but they are with commercial banks. But obviously you've got this kind of, you're not having to repay them a month, say, of getting the money. You have extra time. You don't pay back until you finish studying. There are also charity grants you can look into as well. Now I've given a link here to to gradfunding.co.uk, and this is, gradfunding is a link to a booklet that a history PhD student in King's has put together. And he funded his PhD through having small grants from various charities. Now, some of the charities will be fairly substantial ones that might give you quite substantial grants. Some of them will be quite small and obscure, and they might, some of them at the most basic level will be the kind of people who will give you, say, money to go to an academic conference because you happen to have been to a particular school and perhaps you were the best at English Lit in the year or something like that. So they can be quite small ones, but they can still be nonetheless useful. Luke Blaxill was the student who put this funding together. And even if you are thinking about going for a research council grant, and indeed if you get one, you may still want to have a look at that and see what things are offering, what might be suitable for you to top up other sorts of funding. There's also advice on the SAS website as well. It's particularly important if you are not a UK or EU citizen. They've got lots of advice on different pots of funding that might be suitable and for you. So, funding after you've done your PhD, for example, what kind of schemes are there? Well, unsurprisingly, the research councils crop up again, so the ESRC and the AHRC. Now, they've all just reconfigured their kind of big change around of all their schemes, but the British Academy have kept their scheme, which will pay your salary for up to 3 years. There's an ESRC Early Career Grant Scheme, also known as Future Leaders, and there's also a similar AHRC grant, again with a focus on preparing people for academic leadership in the future. So these are all these kind of fellowships. If you think your MA is, if you're thinking about going on for an MA for a PhD, or thinking it might be a possibility, an MA is often giving you subject and often research training in your area. PhD is about going on and doing research, coming up with a fellowship. And what these schemes are all about are enabling you to publish, often to convert your thesis into a book or journal articles to prepare research grants for your next major research project. I had the old style ESRC grant, and I used that time to convert my thesis into a book. I was able to do some extra research. I just had some time away from teaching to kind of sit down and think about my research. There's also the Leverhulme Foundation grant, in which the Leverhulme will pay 50% of your salary and the institution will pay it as well. So again, the same sort of thing, allowing you time to develop your research. And these will fund subjects in the vast majority of the arts, humanities and social sciences. So quite a wide range. But the Leverhulme will also do some science subjects as well. Not that there are people at SAS who will be doing sciences, but they will cover the vast majority of subjects that people study here at the school. And again, also institutional schemes as well. Universities will often advertise sort of things like new blood fellowships, like trying to encourage new researchers by giving them the time to develop their work. So, some kind of basics about applying for research funding. And these, here I'm talking about a PhD postdoc, but even if you're applying for an MA only funding scheme, these apply as well. If you're doing a PhD or a postdoc, you need to have a sound research question. So in other words, it's what is it? You need to be able to say explicitly what it is you're interested in finding out about. So what is the question you are going to answer? And beyond that, you kind of need to make a case for the person who's reviewing your form as to why does this need to be studied. So what is it that you're interested in, and why does it need to be studied? So quite often that's thinking about the gap in the literature. So thinking particularly about PhD postdocs, or if you're applying for an MA with a view to doing a PhD, thinking about, in the course of your reading, well, what is it people haven't looked at? Well, if everyone's looked at something, have they missed out a particular angle? What's the gap? What are you going to bring to academia? What are you going to bring to this body, to this field? What's your contribution? And who might benefit from the research? Now, immediately, there will be the academic community, historians, lawyers, anthropologists, geographers, literary studies. But will people beyond the academy benefit as well? And I think if you give this some thought, you will find groups who will benefit. In my kind of field, which is the history of social policy, it's quite easy for me to say policymakers in these fields will benefit from. I can also talk about charities, groups of practitioners who will benefit. But if you think about it, there will also, in most fields, there will be people beyond academia who will benefit from the research. So it's important to think about who those groups might be. Why now? Why should you be funded now in 2012 for work that you start in 2012, 2013? Why is it important to find out now? And why you? Why are you equipped? With an MA, if you're starting funding from an MA, it's thinking about what skills do you have from your undergraduate work experiences that equip you to be funded to do your MA. What do you have? If you're thinking about doing a PhD or going on to postdoctoral funding, again, just thinking about what skills you have, what subject knowledge, what will you bring? And why are you using your particular method or approach? So, for example, the student I was working with today is going to do your history project. We're talking today about, trying to justify why your history project, as opposed to going and looking at things in the archive. So why that? What is it that can bring? Obviously, with this student's research question about apprenticeship, speaking to people who were apprentices in the past, the point is because oral history allows you access into lived experience. So think about in your own work what it is, method-wise, that you can use and how it will inform your work, your research in a way that other methods won't. And also, it's really important to make the case confidently. This research will, rather than this research may. Be confident, be assertive. It's getting the balance right. On the one hand, you don't want to make too gross a claim, so that you're going to absolutely revolutionise the field, but you may do. But in terms of gravicosa, that's likely to. Yes, don't make too gross a claim. On the other hand, don't undersell yourself. Remember, when people are reviewing applications, they will probably have 20 or 30 on a standard form, and they need not to have to make. You need to be assertive and say, this is me. Literally say, this is an interesting proposal. I know I'm the right person. This is the right time to do it. This is the best method. Please give me some money. So it's about making sure that the language is confident and that people, it's really clear what it is that you're doing. It's not too much jargon. It gets to the point and conveys its message